All right, so we are going to be using, we are going to talk about using imagery today, aka visualization. I'm not sure which version you're going to want. I always heard it called visualization for years. I've even heard NASA use that term before. And then all of a sudden, I read this BCS certification, and it's like they call it imagery, and I was like, "What are you guys doing?" But yeah, so imagery or visualization, whichever one you want to call it, is a really cool tool. It's the using the ability that we have to sort of imagine things, right? Like we're going to use our senses and our imagination to sort of create or maybe recreate different experiences in the mind, right? So the idea behind visualization is it's like you can sort of practice things or you can kind of experience things in your brain, and it can actually have a really positive, tangible effect on your life. I don't know if anybody in here is like a really big fan of the Secret, I think is what it's called. There's a book that's all about like thinking a certain way and being very like optimistic, and it will have like sort of positive effects on your life by giving you the things that you want, right? People they call it like manifesting, right? People will sort of manifest something. Now this is just my opinion, but personally I don't necessarily think that you are able to sort of manifest things in such a way by thinking that you're going to do something and thinking, and then like that kind of sends out like brain waves, and then those brain waves sort of pull things back into the world. That's my understanding of it. So I'm not an expert on that in any capacity. Personally, that's not really how I see things happening. However, I will say they have seen it countless times, and when they track it, when they're tracking like human progress in a lot of ways, they have measured this in people. I've seen it myself. I'm sure you guys have seen it. We do know that when people are very optimistic and when they have like a singular focus, that they tend to achieve the things that they set out to do. There are a bajillion stories out there. I mean, I think the guy's a little bit of a weirdo, but like Jeff Bezos is a really good example. If you ever look, he did something that was kind of a dorky thing to do. Sign garage. So he ran Amazon out of his garage when he first started. He had like an idea of what he wanted this company to be, and he took like a piece of paper and he put it up on the wall. He was like running the website himself the whole time and just spray painted his logo. Not his logo, he just spray painted the name of his company there when he was kind of getting things. He was working out of his own garage and stuff. And like he talks about like why he did that. Like people are like, it's like nobody ever saw that garage. Nobody ever like walked in there. Why did he feel the need to have like a sign up on the wall? And he'll talk about, he says like, look, he's like, I knew that I wanted to grow my company into something professional someday, and I wanted to be in a setting that made me feel like I was in a professional setting, that I was going to that it was going to be an example of what my business would look like in the future, much larger. And yeah, I think that like he very much sort of visualized, he imagined what he wanted, and then he started doing things that would sort of get him there. If you guys maybe put like a picture of a Lamborghini on, the corner of your TV monitor, your computer monitor, or put a picture of like a house that you want to buy someday on the mirror, and you see those things every day, I think that that can lead to small like changes in the way that you live your life and the direction that your life is heading, and then it can lead to you like making the types of decisions that give you that. It's sort of a placebo effect for activating habits, and we definitely know that placebo effects are also a very, very valuable and very powerful tool actually. So that is what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about like how we can actually sort of imagine things and use that to make things happen. So when we talk about imagery, what we mean is we are using all of the appropriate senses in order to be able to create or recreate something. What we mean when we say all senses, we can say that it is polysensory. Like it really does kind of use everything. This is something, like I said, this is kind of just like a weird thing to say, I guess, but I don't see myself as having sort of the most accurate or really powerful imagination, which is why I don't like use imagery for myself very often, even though I do encourage my clients to do it. It's because like I don't really often have it as sort of be a polysensory thing, and I also don't have a lot of control over my imagery. A lot of times when I start like imagining things, I tend to, my imagination runs wild, like I'll sit down and be like, all right, what do I want this year to look like? Making a New Year's resolution. And then all of a sudden, Batman shows up and he's fighting crime and I'm working with him. Like, that'd be awesome. You need to have a little bit more, you need to work on developing control in your imagery in order to sort of target it in realistic ways. So it's polysensory, right? It's not just sort of seeing things in your head. It's also like imagining how things are going to smell and how they're going to feel and touch, and what the temperature is going to be like and what you're hearing, around you. It's using really all of your senses. And it can be used to, like I said, it can be used to sort of recreate experiences, right? So like if you have a client, we do know that like therapists will do this all the time, where like therapists will be working with someone, like psychotherapy, for instance. Psychotherapy is that classic therapy that you see in movies and TVs, where it's the usually like a German psychiatrist, and he's like, tell me about your mother, like that's how I kind of always seems to break down. Somebody's sitting on a chair and then they go on and on and on. I just saw actually this meme was posted yesterday, and I was like, oh man, if I had seen that like a couple days ago, that would have been perfect. Let's see here, therapist number 8 infinite. Let's see if I can pull up that picture. Yeah, I just saw this, like this came up on my feed, I think yesterday, and I was like, oh man, like if this had come up on day one when we were talking about the origins of psychiatry and stuff, this would have been perfect. But it was like like a therapist sitting there and telling them to, why don't you lie back and tell me about your past. It's like, now if I lay down, it'll take forever. Just an infinity sign for yeah. I don't need to explain the joke, but but I thought that was really funny. So that's the kind of classic thing where they're like, they would lay somebody down on one of those weird chaise lounge things, and then just take somebody back through time. They would recreate all these experiences in their brain and like sort of walk through it. And it's like, I'm 8 years old and I'm experiencing this. You see that all the time. That's sort of using imagery. And so it can sort of be a really powerful way to kind of take yourself back and kind of look at things. I've often encouraged my clients here and there to, in the ways that I have sort of used imagery with my clients. I've had them like, when they will vent some frustrations to me, like during like a training session or something, they'll come in and they'll talk about how their workout sucked, or they'll come in and talk about like how they had like a really bad week of eating. They were just like, they're really stressed out, and they're just like kind of flustered, and you can tell they can't let it go. Like it just keeps like, there's kind of this like cloud over their head, while they're like working out. I want working out to be, I always want every session to be a pleasant experience. And so, sometimes I'll just ask questions, be like, hey, like, what's going on? Why, you don't seem like you're in a great place today. And they'll kind of describe it. And sometimes like it can be really helpful to have them sort of take themselves back and sort of reimagine that scenario, so they can sort of like, just cope with it. It's like they take themselves back, and then it's like, oh, well, tell me a little bit more, like what happened. I'm not trying to be a therapist. I'm certainly not taking them back into their past or anything to dredge up old memories and then come to terms with those things. But when they kind of reimagine it, they kind of see it, and it just kind of gets some of that weight off their chest, because maybe they haven't anybody else to share it with. And that's that's sometimes our role. I'll tell you guys, the things that people will tell you sometimes during training sessions is wild to me. Like there's so many times where I've had clients share things with me, and I'm like, in my back of my own head, I'm like thinking, I'm like, man, like this person really trusts me to be able to like, share this with me. Like I had a client that I will try to keep as anonymous as possible. I will not say if they were a he or she, but they were like cheating on their spouse, and they were just telling me all about it. And I was like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And they had a lot of sessions left, and I was very poor at the time. I don't know if now I would continue training someone like that. I'd be like, I gotta get out of this, you know. I think now I would probably be a little bit more prone to that. But I remember at the time being like, oh, I don't want to be working with this person much longer. There were some other things too, a couple like sleazy things they were doing, but at the time I was I was like barely paying my bills, so I was like, I took every client I could get. Living the LA fitness life. But yeah, so the things that people share with you are kind of wild sometimes, but sometimes imagery can be a really powerful tool to sort of recreate those experiences. Because if your client has, you know, they're like, oh, I'm just, you know, this is the type of scenario I'm always really bad at. They can sort of get themselves in that same framework and realize that they do have a little bit more strength and power to kind of get through that. And they don't necessarily have to feel so stuck. It can also be used to recreate like emotions. It can be used to recreate thoughts. Like you can take your, you know, clients can take themselves through it. And that could be used to not only like enhance like how they feel about like that scenario, but also it can boost their confidence by maybe them seeing in a much more objective sort of light, you know. A lot of times when we're first describing things, we tend to like, you know, we'll either play the victim or we'll talk about like how wronged we were. We'll see things in certain lights, and then if we kind of sort of like take ourselves back and like kind of recreate it, we start to see that like objectively it's like, oh well, maybe they didn't necessarily have the intention of doing this, or you know, maybe it didn't necessarily shake out the way I initially kind of thought it did. So that's kind of a nice thing as well, you know. Or you could see like, oh, I guess I could have made like a different choice in like this scenario. Athletes will do that all the time. This is why visualization, I'd say, if you are going to use imagery with your clients, I'd say you're probably going to end up using it with athletes more than anyone. That's a really big like thing in the world of like sports psychology, just taking yourself back, re-experiencing like a play so you can kind of run it differently in your head, and the next time you run into that team, you're going to sort of know how to sort of overcome that, you know. Because if you ran a route the wrong way, or if you executed a play just slightly improperly, or if somebody else just played a little bit better than you, you know, you can sort of like see that and practice it in your head, and it'll have a positive impact on, you know, how you play in real life. So there's a lot of evidence of imagery being very effective and working. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. You know, what I mean by that is there's just like a lot of stories. Now, here's what I'll say, like, you know, if we look at like the levels, let's see if I can find this actually, levels of research. Is that what I want to see? Yeah, okay. So here's sort of the pyramid of the most valuable information out there. So this is a great way to analyze supplements, by the way, guys. We're on a little sidetrack here, but like this is a great way to kind of look at things. If you are trying to determine whether a workout program is going to be effective or whether a diet is going to be effective, or a supplement or something like that, this is how you want to approach the research. David, you mentioned that you picked up the Science and Development of Muscular Hypertrophy by Brad Schoenfeld. And you said it was on the way, right? So
yes, it gets here Monday.
Love that. Here's why I like that book so much. That book, Brad Schoenfeld, the author of it, what he did was he did a meta-analysis of all kinds of different workout programs that had been done in the past, took all of that, and then he put it into practice, and actually like implemented those things and trained those things and took the info from the meta-analysis, and that's what he based his findings on. And that is why I believe that like when it comes to the science of like muscle growth and stuff, there's nobody in the entire industry as good at it as Brad Schoenfeld. I think that if you want to understand that stuff better than anyone, you read that book. So here's the thing. We start with like ideas and opinions and editorials. You'll notice that like this is kind of where things start. So when I say like an idea or an opinion or an editorial is just like a story, right? That's anecdotal evidence. So like this is where it starts. You know, people, you hear your friend says that they went on the keto diet and it was the most effective thing in the world for them. They were like, oh man, I've been doing keto and it works so well. You got to try it, right? That's a story. That's somebody telling you that it worked, right? And I think that that is evidence. So if you hear enough people say something, there's probably a little bit of truth to it, right? That's where it starts. It's not the most powerful type of evidence. I'd say it's sort of the worst type of evidence, right? It's for us to make like a scientific opinion about something. That's where it starts, right? But then, right, if we see like a case study, we see like a story about some type of evidence, right? So a case study is where scientists maybe did like a little experiment, right? Now, that might sound like, well, that sounds great. They did the experiment. They tested their theory, right? And it's good. It is really good. But it's only a little bit better than anecdotal evidence because if it's one singular case study, it's not the most powerful thing in the world. You know, a lot of times, like, you know, the problem with experiments is that they sort of leave they leave a gap in the things that they're not testing for, you know, or they are testing for one, they got tunnel vision. They're like testing for one specific thing. Case studies are often where you find like supplements will have like their nutrition claims from. So when you buy like a supplement, it says like, hey, we saw this and it did this. That's probably true. They're definitely not like lying, but they are leaving out all of the other data as well, you know. They can't do that with medication. They can, you know, side effects have to be listed. Um, but like supplements don't have to do that. So like they're like, see, we saw people lose weight. And it's like, what you don't know about that case study is that, you know, the company that did the experiment is also the company that's marketing the pill, you know, the supplement, I should say. Um, so like, you know, it's not the best, but it's pretty decent, you know. So we got the sort of like stories at the bottom. That's okay. A little bit better than that is like seeing an actual like experiment that has been done, some type of case study. Now a little bit better than that is some type of like primary research study. This is where we get like a controlled trial. This is what all the COVID trials were. Like I'm doing one of these right now actually. But like being in like a specific cohort study where they're taking like, you know, smaller populations and testing that population in particular, than like another small population, they're testing them, you know, like it's very controlled research. That's a little bit better, right? Because now it's eliminating some variables. Because if they're like, we saw everybody lose weight, right? And it's like they tested, you know, people from 18 to 80, you know, it's like that's a lot of data, you know, like it's hard to weed through that. So again, case study is a little bit worse, but primary research a little bit better. You know, from there, you'll see like clinically appraised primary research. So this is like what we call evidence-based research. This is somebody who has like done an experiment and then someone else unassociated with them has looked at it and appraised it and said, hey, this was really good because like they made sure that they were accounting for this population. They made sure that they weren't, you know, letting other, you know, they weren't letting people do this, right? I told you guys about the experiment where they had two groups of people and they lied to the groups and told them that they were going to put them on a diet in like, I think it was 8 to 12 weeks. They were like, we're going to put you on a diet in 8 weeks or 12 weeks. And all we want you to do for right now is food journal, right? And then the other group, they didn't tell them to food journal. They were like, we'll see you in 8 to 12 weeks and we'll put you on this diet. And they noticed that like during that 8 to 12 week period, the group that was food journaling lost a bunch of weight. And it was because you know, they were the conclusion that they drew is because they were journaling, they became more conscientious. They become more aware of what they were putting into their body. So then they made adjustments so that they could like, you know, experience that weight loss and start this, you know, program in 8 weeks or 12 weeks. They could start on the right foot. Sadly, they never did go through that in 8 to 12 weeks. That they were the experiment, you know. But that was like reviewed and by other people, like other scientists outside of that read how they did the research and they were like, it was a really smart thing to have two groups do it, you know, because they had the control group and then they had like the experiment group that works really well. And that's where systematic reviews come in. eventually, after like one person sort of reviews it, you'll get like what's called a systematic review, where they really go in detail. This is where we're starting to get into really good research here. And if you see something was systematically reviewed, there's probably a lot of truth behind it. Again, do I think keto works? Yeah, I think that it can be really effective. But to say that it is the best diet that's out there, I don't think diets work that way. I don't think there is a best diet out there. I like intermittent fasting when it's appropriate for my clients. I like keto when it's appropriate. Maybe carnivore even. I think that one's a little bit more fringe. The research on carnivore is still, I'd say, down here at the bottom of the pyramid. I know plenty of stories about people who have had success. I'm sure all of us have heard Joe Rogan talk about it. If you're following diets regularly, it's definitely out there. But I haven't seen as much research on it. And until I do, I'm kind of only dipping my toes in sort of that type of water. Definitely not going to bash the carnivore diet for sure. Wouldn't bash any diet because I got to look at this pyramid before I do, Tell you what, the grapefruit diet, where my mom was talking about that the other day. She was telling me about when she was in her early 20s, she went on the watermelon diet, where you literally just eat watermelon for a week. And I was like, I was so frustrated. Somebody came up with that idea and then just tried it. And then some other people like reiterated. They were like, it worked for this person. There's a story, right? Like that's anecdotal. It's the weakest form of evidence. I got to wrap this up because to me, this is a really fun area to talk about, but it's not directly, it only ties into the small part of what we're talking about right now. So you get a systematic review, then you get the meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis is where a scientist will look at tons of other research that is similar to the first one. So this is what Brad Schoenfeld did when he was trying to figure out the optimum amount of sets, reps, and volume over a week-long period for training. That's what the book is really about. That's what he was testing for. He wanted to figure out of all the training programs that are out there, what is the optimum amount of volume per week? How many sets should you train your chest for? How many sets should you train your glutes for optimal growth? And then he also wanted to look for some other stuff, but that is what his first thing was. And he did a meta-analysis where he looked at thousands, not exaggerating, thousands of other research case studies that had been done, and then like took the primary ones and analyzed all of them and looked for trends. So one group of scientists did this and another group did that. He saw a link between the two and drew a conclusion. That's a meta-analysis. That is a really powerful, very strong, good type of evidence. When you hear a meta-analysis was done and it says that this supplement worked really well, now you got me believing that supplement's going to work, And then lastly, we have like evidence summaries, which is where people will take that meta-analysis, they'll draw that conclusion, and they kind of restart the pyramid. They are actually going to do research directly. They're going to practice that research that they found there, and then they're going to kind of build another pyramid on top of that. They're going to, take that through and sort of draw that opinion. So here's the thing about imagery. We have seen a ton of anecdotal evidence in terms of like how it works. Different individuals talking about amazing things that they have done and how that has enhanced their own life in a lot of different ways. We have seen case studies where we've used imagery to be really effective. And we've even seen experimental studies that have used imagery and we've seen it be very effective. So I would say we know that imagery is a very powerful tool. It is at the top of the pyramid, which is exactly what we're looking for. Just like cognitive behavior, like all of these things we've been talking about, the reason NASM is using these techniques, all of them are at the top of the pyramid. We know that they are all pretty effective tools. Now, you might not find goal setting to be effective, but someone else might. That's fine, right? All of it, you might find that this diet works for you and then recognize that it might not work for your other clients. That's also fine, but this is what we're seeing. So I do want to show you some scientific approaches where they've used imagery in some really cool ways to do some cool stuff. So I got a fun one here. The sun. All right, so this is an ASAP science video with some really cool. Man, I started looking up like stand-up paddleboarding, like buying one of those or buying a kayak after going to Hawaii, and now it is just all of my ads. All right, let me show the sound here. I love this video. This is such a cool story. All right, here we go.
For years, scientists believed that the brain was static, unchanging, and locked, but our understanding has changed drastically to the point where we now see the brain as plastic and constantly changing. But what if I told you that simply thinking could affect not only the way your brain works, but its physical shape and structure as well? It turns out this is exactly what happens. From a neuroscientific standpoint, imagining an action and doing it require the same motor and sensory programs in the brain. For example, if you were to close your eyes and imagine the letter B, the primary visual cortex lights up in the same way it does when you look at the letter on the screen. Take a moment and imagine yourself writing out your signature with your dominant hand. Chances are, the amount of time it takes you to simply imagine doing it is similar to how long it actually takes to write it out. Try doing the same thing with your non-dominant hand and it actually takes you longer to write and imagine.
Try that really quick, guys. Just, you don't have to close your eyes or anything, but just imagine your brain. Take a second right now and write your signature with your dominant hand. Now imagine doing it with your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, write it with your left hand. It takes way longer. And it's just something you're imagining. Why would something you are imagining, where in my imagination, I can do things perfectly, you know, I can be a superhero, I can fly, I can do whatever I want in my imagination. Why did it take longer? Right? And it's because when we imagine things, they're actually very similar to how we would actually do things in real life. Back over.
Longer to write and imagine. How is this relevant? Well, because imagination and action are actually integrated and engage the same neural pathways, practicing one actually influences the other. One fascinating study took 2 groups and had them practice piano for 2 hours a day, except one group was only allowed to use mental practice. They couldn't touch the piano, but would sit in front of it and imagine practicing. The surprising result? The exact same physical changes took place in the motor cortex of both groups. And after 3 days, their accuracy in playing was the exact same. Beyond 5 days, the physical practice group did begin to excel faster, but the imagination group, when given the chance to practice physically, was able to catch up to their skill level quickly. Perhaps more incredible is an experiment which used imagination in an effort to strengthen muscles. Both groups did the same figure muscle exercises for 4 weeks, though one group simply did it mentally. Those who actually did the physical exercise increased their strength by 30%, while those who imagined doing it increased their muscle strength by 22%. This is because the neurons responsible for the movement instruction were still being used and strengthened, resulting in increased strength when the muscles actually contracted. So, while your thoughts don't have some mystical or magical power, mental practice is an effective way to prepare for a physical skill. Each thought actually changes the structure and function of your brain by affecting the neurons at the microscopic level. Though, as much as we wish you could sit there and become the next Mozart, it won't happen without a lot of hard physical work. But a little imagination never hurts.
So, freaking love that video. I love stories like that. It is amazing to see that like people have actually experienced physical changes simply by imagining things, right? They were told to imagine practicing the piano, and then they got better at the piano. So just to give you another anecdotal sort of evidence here, this is something I've never. When I was on vacation last week, I went stand-up paddleboarding for the first time, and I was like, that doesn't look too hard. I was like, that I could figure that out very, very quickly. And then like surfing, I was like, surfing's really hard, but I'll bet I could figure it out on, you know, in like a place like this. And I've never tried either before. And so I went over, took the paddleboard and just kind of hopped up on it. Went in really confident, because I was like, honestly, like that looks really easy to me now that I've actually like watched someone do it. Uh, did it, went around the waves, goofed around, never fell in the water even once. Um, and I honestly think that like a big part of that was just having like a lot of like confidence going in really helped. Now, when I went surfing, it was kind of a different story. I kind of got my butt kicked a couple times. It was definitely way, way harder because it's a much more advanced thing to have to sort of move along like a freaking moving wave. But also like it wasn't nearly as hard as I have kind of imagined it in my head over the years. I've always kind of seen surfing as something that's like pretty unapproachable. I don't love swimming. It's not really my favorite thing. But I found all of that much, much easier. And I always thought that it would be really like exhausting to be on a freaking surfboard and just paddle with your arms only. I was like, that seems so exhausting. Did in real life. I was like, oh, this is very easy. So anyway, I'm like gonna get into this. I figured out where I'm gonna go take lessons. I just need to like save up the money before I want to do it. I want to have more in the bank before I do this. But this summer, I'm definitely gonna go take lessons and start to get into this. And it's because like now I've kind of tried it, but I like, the seeing other people do it gave me the confidence to sort of imagine myself in that scenario and then sort of like start practicing this new skill. That is a lot of times where we start with our clients, right? We are oftentimes trying to enhance their self-confidence by, surrounding them by other people in the gym, modeling for them and showing them what an exercise is going to look like. We are trying to create like a certain level of competence or confidence in our client that they can achieve like what it is they set out to achieve, right? So we've seen it enhance the confidence in sports. We've seen it in exercise. Confidence is definitely something that sort of comes along with effective imagery, right? But it can also be used to enhance motivation. So if you are like a big vision board person, for instance, right? And like you put things on this board that you see every day and you're like, there's the house I'm gonna own someday, there's this I'm gonna have someday, right? And you see that kind of on a regular basis, and that is sort of guiding you. That's a way that we've seen imagery be very effective for some people. I personally don't have like a vision board, but I definitely do things that like continually remind me, to check on things regularly and make sure that I'm moving my life in the direction that I want to move it in, and that's like a big part of like using imagery as well. So I got another one. I got another fun video for you. This one. So this has got some more really kind of, that's what I love about these videos in particular. I just love that they have some really just super, in my opinion, fascinating stories all about like how imagery has been used and stuff. So here we go.
Mastering any physical skill, be it performing a pirouette, playing an instrument, or throwing a baseball, takes practice. Practice is the repetition of an action with the goal of improvement, and it helps us perform with more ease, speed, and confidence. So what does practice do in our brains to make us better at things? Our brains have two kinds of neural tissue, gray matter and white matter. The gray matter processes information in the brain, directing signals and sensory stimuli to nerve cells, while white matter is mostly made up of fatty tissue and nerve fibers. In order for our bodies to move, information needs to travel from the brain's gray matter down the spinal cord through a chain of nerve fibers called axons to our muscles. So how does practice or repetition affect the inner workings of our brains? The axons that exist in the white matter are wrapped with a fatty substance called myelin, and it's this myelin covering or sheath that seems to change with practice. Myelin is similar to insulation on electrical cables. It prevents energy loss from electrical signals that the brain uses, moving them more efficiently along neural pathways. Some recent studies in mice suggest that the repetition of a physical motion increases the layers of myelin sheath that insulates the axons. And the more layers, the greater the insulation around the axon chains, forming a sort of superhighway for information connecting your brain to your muscles. So while many athletes and performers attribute their successes to muscle memory, muscles themselves don't really have memory. Rather, it may be the myelination of neural pathways that give these athletes and performers their edge with faster and more efficient neural pathways. There are many theories that attempt to quantify the number of hours, days, and even years of practice that it takes to master a skill. While we don't yet have a magic number, we do know that mastery isn't simply about the amount of hours of practice. It's also the quality and effectiveness of that practice. Effective practice is consistent, intensely focused, and targets content or weaknesses that lie at the edge of one's current abilities. So if effective practice is the key, how can we get the most out of our practice time? Try these tips. Focus on the task at hand. Minimize potential distractions by turning off the computer or TV and putting your cell phone on airplane mode. In one study, researchers observed 260 students studying. On average, those students were able to stay on task for only 6 minutes at a time. Laptops, smartphones, and particularly Facebook were the root of most distractions. Start out slowly or in slow motion. Coordination is built with repetitions, whether correct or incorrect. If you gradually increase the speed of the quality repetitions, you have a better chance of doing them correctly. Next, frequent repetitions with allotted breaks are common practice habits of elite performers. Studies have shown that many top athletes, musicians, and dancers spend 50 to 60 hours per week on activities related to their craft. Many divide their time used for effective practice into multiple daily practice sessions of limited duration. And finally, practice in your brain in vivid detail. It's a bit surprising, but a number of studies suggest that once a physical motion has been established, it can be reinforced just by imagining it. In one study, 144 basketball players were divided into two groups. Group A physically practiced one-handed free throws, while Group B only mentally practiced them. When they were tested at the end of the 2-week experiment, the intermediate and experienced players in both groups had improved by nearly the same amount. As scientists get closer to unraveling the secrets of our brains, our understanding of effective practice will only improve. In the meantime, effective practice is the best way we have of pushing our individual limits, achieving new heights, and maximizing our potential.
So again, yeah, we have seen like people get better at shooting one-handed free throws simply by imagining that they were practicing one-handed free throws. So really, really kind of fun stuff there, right? This is where that sort of if you've ever seen stuff that's like talks about how powerful and effective positive thinking can be and optimism, this is kind of what we're talking about, right? So it can definitely be used to help you feel like a sense of competency. If you can imagine yourself doing like a particular activity, you can actually do that particular activity. I used to teach when I was teaching group exercise classes. I would run around and be reading the room and just try and sometimes like those cardio classes can be brutally difficult, and so you gotta just dredge up some emotional motivation from all these people in that room. If you ever taught spin or if you guys ever teach group exercise, you'll find very quickly what I mean when you can start to see people like as they start to their muscles start to get tired and their bodies start to get tired, you can start to see it sort of creep into the brain because their muscles burn, they feel like crap, so we want to enhance and keep them like motivated so that like they can keep kind of pushing through these really difficult classes. And I would always encourage people, I'd say stuff like, hey, like, I know this is hard right now, but like your future self is going to thank you. I want you to think about like conjure up an image in your head of like what it's going to be like, in a couple months when you are, reaching your goals and, down the path. It's been a little while, and like, you're thinking back to this moment right here where you're like all of the accomplished work that I've created and how I've, sort of worked hard, and how today is maybe like a milestone for you, so I'd always encourage people to like, I want you to imagine your future self thinking back to this moment and be thankful that you're working so hard right now. And that was always like, some people would love that. Other people not so much, and that's fine. It's not necessarily the right tool for everybody. But I had people come up and be like, "That was so motivating." I'm so you're right. Like I think more about like, future me, and like I'm setting the foundation right now. It's like, yeah, absolutely. So it can definitely be used to enhance the motivation of our clients, by helping them sort of develop new strategies or increase the motivation, like a sport or an activity or something like that. It can also be used to enhance like the emotional response. So like if you know that you're going into a stressful situation, take the time to kind of imagine that stressful situation, see it in a little bit more of an objective, sort of fairer way. That can really help you sort of calm down any anxiety levels that you might have. I've been trying to use this lately whenever I go to my freaking COVID experiment. Because like I just hate needles, and I don't do very well with needles. But I was reading some things recently about like how to sort of deal with it, and lately it's been much better. It's not great. I don't love the experience yet, but it's a very helpful way to sort of like control that emotional response, right? My mom, she was really nervous on airplanes. Whenever there was a little bit of turbulence on the flight, across the ocean, which really freaked her out. I was like, just imagine, I want you to just put your head on, imagine being on the beach, Mom, it's gonna be great, And then on the way back, I was like, imagine all the fun stuff we get to do when we get back to LA, because we got a lot of stuff planned this week. So that's the thing, right? We're trying to sort of decrease anxiety levels. We're trying to sort of influence our emotional response, and we can have these sort of like positive things. It can also be used to enhance your concentration. We have seen our ability to focus a little bit better can come from like visualization or imagery, right? Taking the time to simply learn how to sit and like imagine yourself practicing can actually have a positive benefit when you actually do practice. I was always told by my coach to practice shooting when I was on the basketball team, and I never did. And if I could go back, I would definitely tell my past self to imagine it in my head so I would stop getting bored. I don't know, basketball just turned out to not be my thing. I got like totally, I just was always kind of bored whenever I was shooting around. I feel kind of the same way actually about catch. Even when I'm playing ultimate stuff, I never warm up playing, like I never like warm up my throws before the game like everybody else does. I don't know what that part of my brain is. I don't know why I'm like that. I know that it's not great. And I should work to improve it. But I do know that like that's like part of my personality. I don't love that type of practice because it just doesn't feel like I'm actually practicing in the game. But what did help was eventually like running drills where it was like you have to do 5 forehands, 5 backhands, 5 in and outs, 5 out and ins. And I was like, oh, that's like going through like a system like that. That helped me a lot. So now I can kind of imagine that, and I do practice that. And every now and then, like, I'll sort of like take myself through that and use it to sort of enhance my confidence, because it can get kind of nerve-wracking. When I was going out for like tryouts, I was like, oh man, like these guys can throw really well. And so I was trying to reduce my anxiety by imagining the most effective throws that I have and like what I'm good at and how I'm going to do well and stuff. And that kind of helped control my anxiety a little bit. So that is sort of the evidence, of imagery kind of working. Again, this stuff is sometimes a little bit hard to, no pun intended, but it's hard to imagine or hard to kind of see working, or it's hard to see it as being like effective sometimes. Because this is something we can't really measure. If I show you a picture of somebody who lost 100 pounds, there's a very clear image of like them in the first scenario and them in the second scenario, right? Like those are different if you can see it, right? And so it's very easy to kind of believe it. Imagery sometimes a little bit harder. So we have to sort of hear a lot of like anecdotal evidence and things like that. But I do want to talk just quickly about why we think this works. There's sort of 3 sort of main theories as to why imagery is so effective. One of them is what's called Psycho-Neuromuscular Theory. This is what we heard in the video of the group of people who were improving they were doing finger exercises, which is kind of funny, but they were improving their strength simply by imagining working on their strength. So they got better by simply imagining it, right? So the reason we think that this works is imagery sort of creates motor skills because the neural pathways that use those motor skills are the same neural pathways that fire when we imagine ourselves doing something, doing a particular activity. So your brain will fire in a really similar way when you imagine something as when you actually perform it. You guys already have experienced this for those of you who were in our last mod, but I also did it this mod when we were talking about the digestive system. And I told you to imagine eating like a really salty, greasy piece of pizza, or like your favorite slice of pizza that you've got. And I told you to kind of imagine that. I assume your mouth started watering a little bit, right? And that was like a neuromuscular response to an imagined situation. That's sort of how Psycho-Neuromuscular Theory works, right? Your brain sort of fires and it makes your salivary glands go, oh, we're getting food in a second. So they all kind of like activate and start, spitting out some juice to make it easier to break down that pizza. So they've actually seen this. They've used EMG analysis to sort of practice this, which is pretty cool, right? EMGs, by the way, that's the same thing that they use to measure like muscles. We talked briefly about EMG in our physiology class last mod. But when we look at like EMG activity of certain EMG is basically like a really cool like machine that can measure like how much a muscle is getting neural activation. It's not necessarily measuring how much the muscle is contracting. That's not what it's doing. It's just measuring how much nervous system signal is reaching the muscle. And we know that like our nervous system sort of dictates our strength, right? Because it's how we recruit specific motor units. This is from bodybuilding.com, which anecdotal evidence. They're low on the pyramid I was talking about earlier, but they have broken this down, and they've seen like when it comes to exercises, right? There are certain muscles where like certain fibers are going to be worked a little bit more. So, for instance, that's kind of interesting. Oh, a dumbbell bench press. I hate it when they throw those two together. Got it. They're looking at like activation of like chest muscle fibers, and they've seen that like a dumbbell decline bench press got a lot more activation than a decline bench press, right? And then we see like an incline dumbbell press compared to like a flat dumbbell press. So weirdly, like a flat one sometimes gets the most neural activation. We've seen bent over rows sort of be at the top, right? These are some of the best like activated muscles. Now, I will say, whenever they look at this, I'm pretty sure this is actually because this is bodybuilding.com. I think they are looking at high repetition. So this is what's kind of interesting about this. If you are doing, because bodybuilders are much more about high repetition, because I've looked this up before. If you're looking up, if you look at this article, you'll notice, Thomas Fahey. Okay, yeah, Thomas Fahey. So if you look at this is definitely like a little bit more high repetition. So weirdly, we'll see some exercises that are a little bit less popular in the powerlifting world. But if you go to EMG analysis of powerlifters, you will see every time the reason they're so popular, the big five are going to be our best for muscle activation: barbell squat, barbell deadlift, bench press, barbell bent over row, military press, right? That big five there. You throw some pull-ups in there, that's my big six personally. And now you've got everything you need to create like a full body strength program. It's missing a couple things, missing some external rotation. But those are sort of like for EMG analysis the most effective. Back into the psychology. We think that like we've seen EMG analysis of like those parts of our brain firing when we imagine ourselves doing those exercises. Now, another really cool part of this is what's called symbolic learning theory. We think that imagery helps our brain coordinate our thoughts and actions into sort of like a coding system, right? So like when I say like a coding system, it sort of makes your brain contextual. This is one of the reasons why we think addiction is actually also so hard to break. I don't know about you guys, but like, I think I mentioned this a couple days ago. I had a real problem with soda when I was younger. My parents let me drink soda from age 0. You know, I don't think they ever cared about like soda and stuff. I know other parents were like, no, they can't have the caffeine. My parents were like, well, we drink soda all the time. He can have it. So I grew up like drinking a lot of Coca-Cola in particular. That's my big side. I am a Coca-Cola addict. And it took like a really, you know, I had to stop bringing that stuff into my house, because if it's in my house, I will drain it, you know, and that's totally how I was when I was younger. Now it is my favorite thing to get a soda when I go to the movies, and that is sort of a context thing. It's the one area that like I just can't get rid of it. When I'm in a movie theater, I did it last night, I always get like a soda to go with it. And that's like my favorite sort of like junk food, is like popcorn and soda. Those two things in my brain are just linked together. So if I smell popcorn, my brain goes, oh, we must be getting soda soon. And that's sort of how symbolic learning theory works. My brain has drawn like a strong association between those two things. So people who are trying to quit smoking will often do great in their homes, and then they'll go out in the world and they will smell someone else smoking, and it hits them, and then all of a sudden they start getting like a craving, right? It is where we basically learn specific patterns associated with emotions, thoughts, other like experiences, right? And we start to sort of like associate those things together. And so now if you're trying to get in the zone, right? We can use imagery and symbolic learning theory to make this a little bit more effective. One of my favorite athletes to highlight this is Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps uses imagery better than any, well, I don't know about better than any other athlete out there, but he uses imagery in a really effective way. If you ever watched his warm-up routine, let's see if I can just find this and keep it on mute. That's his warm-up swim. Yeah, well, he talks about visualization here. I feel like I showed this video recently, actually, because it says it's played. But you know what? Here, let's check this out. So he's going to talk about using visualization here. This is a really effective tool that, like I said, Phelps is a really big fan of this. So he's got this is 2 videos that kind of highlight him talking about why it works so well for him.
You wrote a lot about visualization, right? I mean, that that's visualization. You're visualizing that world record. Talk about how that became part of your process and why you think it's so helpful.
I mean, for me, when I got to a swim meet, there's nothing that I can control at that point, right? I can control what I do and how I prepare, sort of getting up behind the block and just racing. I can't control what anybody else does. So for me, I want to know how the race could go, how I don't want the race to go, and in a perfect world, how the race should go. Because it all goes back to preparation. If you're not preparing yourself before the meet, you're not going to get a time you deserve. So for me, I have to make sure I'm doing all the work leading up to a big meet so that I get behind the block and I don't have to think about anything else. I'm not worried about how I prepared. So I started visualizing at like 13, 14, just so everything around me was taken care of when I got to a meet, so I could be completely relaxed. So when I put my headphones on, all I'm thinking about is the music. I get to go up and just do what I practice to do. All of those countless hours of staring at the black line at the bottom of the pool, that was for this moment. So I just never really thought when I got behind the block and let everything do what was supposed to happen. If I didn't get the results that I wanted, then I would just go back to the drawing board. And that's really just how I worked my whole life. But I mean, visualizing just, it just mentally prepares you, and you can kind of check that box off. And I think that's what we wanted to do. Every time we got to a major international competition, we wanted to check off as many boxes as we could. Because if we did that, then what else do we have to worry about? Everything else is just going to happen naturally like it should.
So that's kind of a fun story, right? Like he just talks about like how he'll imagine himself like in a scenario that gives him a lot more control. It gives him a lot more confidence to actually like engage in this particular activity. Phil Jackson was really big on this. He would always like, encourage like a specific type of like mental toughness in his athletes. And it can be just a really effective thing. There's a little bit of a different approach to it, a different way that he uses it, where he talks about his actual warm up and stuff.
The biggest thing I think that really separated me through my career was my mental game. Everything that was in between my ears. Like for me, it's just, I eventually got to the point where I was competing against myself because I was so hard on myself. And, for me to improve, I had to get stronger mentally, and I had to find a way to do it. And I think my coach helped me get through that process and learn more. So for me, like when I would visualize, I visualize every single, getting up to a meet, I would visualize probably a month or so in advance, just of what could happen, what I want to happen, and what I don't want to happen. Because when it happened, I was prepared for it.
Well, I think we start with relaxation techniques and putting your mind in a place where you can actually visualize effectively. I know when Michael was young, I gave his mom a book of progressive relaxation, and before he would go to bed at night, she would go in and read this progression of things to do, like clench your fists, take
basically,
you through
a whole, like you work through your whole
body. And actually it got so good, she'd just open the book, say 2 things, and he'd be asleep. He got really good at relaxing. So once you can put yourself in a relaxed state, then I tell them it's like watching a movie. It's essentially what it is. Sometimes it's like you're sitting in the stands watching yourself swim. And sometimes it's like you're in the water swimming. The key to visualization is, number one, it has to be very vivid. It has to be rehearsed many, many times. And the reason it works is because the brain cannot distinguish between something that's really vividly visualized and something that's real. So by the time Michael steps up on the block to swim a race in a World Championships or Olympic Games, he's swum that race hundreds of times in his mind before he gets up there. So then when he gets up, all he has to do is shut everything down and it goes on autopilot. His body automatically knows what to do. The brain just switches into what he's visualized. And that's what's really powerful about visualization.
When I would visualize, it would be what you want it to be, what you don't want it to be, what it could be.
Yeah.
So it's like you're always ready for anything that comes your way. So it's like if I would have a suit rip, fine, I need another suit, put it on. Like any small thing that could go wrong, I'm ready for it.
Okay, so I haven't watched that in this class before. I think I showed that in a different class, but I forgot how like closely it mirrors what we're talking to next. So another one of the reasons why we think this works is also what we call bioinformational theory, which is basically it takes imagery as a set of propositions, like a flow chart, So if you look at like how flow charts works, there's, it's always going to take you from like, you have this, and then you have like a couple choices, and so you move into the next one, right? And it always just like flows you down the chart as quickly and efficiently as possible, right? So you can see here is kind of an example. This is apparently about like nursing. So, you talk about like a quality event phone risk management. It's like, did you ask them to do this? Yes, you refer to this. If they did that, then you're going to move over to this one. If they say yes to that, you're going to move to this one. If they say yes to that, you're going to move over here and you're done, right? If they say no, you're going to go through like these flows here. So that's kind of how like flow charts work, right? You just kind of take yourself back to the top if you have to, right? There's a lot of like, let's see if we can find like a funny one actually. I feel like there's a lot of memes out there that are all about like flow charts, which are really funny. Pan flute. I don't know what that one's about, but Are you home? Yes. Good. Stay there. Are you home? No. Then go home. Are you home now? Yes or no? No. Then go home. That's sort of a classic flow chart. So the more you practice things in your brain, the faster your flow chart works. That's one of the reasons why we think this works so well. It basically is like coding things into either a stimulus proposition or into a response proposition. So your brain just like learns how to move through those very, 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 very quickly. And that allows us to improve all kinds of different things, not only like our technique when it comes to exercise, but also like our emotional response to things, right? So we can use imagery to improve like specific skills, like motor skills in like exercise, right? If we want to get better at an exercise, we simply explain to our client how we want that exercise to look, and we want to encourage them to imagine themselves doing it properly, right? This is what will happen during like your coaching when you're breaking down like a movement. So let's say you're trying to teach somebody how to do like a squat, curl to press. It's a 3-part, fairly complicated movement, right? You start by teaching them how to do the squat, then you teach them how to do the curl, then you teach them how to do the press. Then you teach them how to do the squat to press, to squat to curl. Then you teach them how to do the curl to press. And then you put them all together, squat, curl to press, right? And so by practicing that and building it up, or maybe having them imagine like doing it in your brain, you're verbally coaching them through it. That is going to help them like understand it better and then do the movement properly. And that's all of this visualization stuff sort of coming together. It can also, in the exact same way that it helps with exercise, be used to improve our self-efficacy. Remember, self-efficacy is the belief that we can achieve what we set out to achieve. Right, so we can use that if our client doesn't necessarily believe that they are going to meet like a weight loss goal, or not that meet like a bench press goal, or something like that. We can say, hey, I want you to first off imagine yourself doing that, because I definitely know you're going to get there. And then I also want you to think back of all the times you've succeeded while we've been working out, right? And so we have them sort of take themselves back and sort of recreate experiences where like, yeah, we weren't very confident about doing the step up curl to press either. But now you overcame that. Let's see if we can do the advanced version. We can do a step up to balance with a curl to press. Just a slightly different version of that exercise, right? Not the most complicated movement in the world, but sometimes people get really nervous doing this, right? Like a step up curl to press is simply like doing it. Those are all step up to balance curls to press, internet. Imagine doing this version here, right? Where both feet are getting planted onto the bench. But then we also have like this version here where you're doing it with like a balanced leg. People will see this one, they'll get nervous. And so if we remind them that they've done something very similar and have them imagine going through that in their head, or recreate the image of them like succeeding last time, it can improve their self-efficacy. It can, and helps them better like, plan for the future and get through that. It can also help us, we can also use imagery to help like our emotional response to things as well. It can be used to reduce stress. That's one of the reasons why you heard Michael Phelps, he was reading the book and learning how to like relax very quickly. That was because if you ever talk to the guy, he actually had a lot of anxiety. It's funny to see Michael Phelps and imagine someone who has a lot of anxiety, because he's such a relaxed dude, but apparently he was a really, really anxious teenager until he like sort of learned how to, create this mental toughness that he has now, which is, very good at sort of responding to that stress, right? And it can be even used to like overcome like pain and discomfort. It's pretty amazing how we've used imagery to sort of trick our brain into getting rid of like literally like physical pain. People will imagine themselves in specific scenarios and it'll reduce pain. Another really fun thing you'll see, I cannot remember what this is called, but phantom box treat. See if I can find an image of this. There's a super fascinating thing. This is wild. So they've done this with people who have lost like limbs. through like, sometimes like somebody will lose a limb in like combat, or they'll lose it in like a traumatic accident or something. They'll lose a limb of some type, right? And they'll get this very interesting thing called phantom limb syndrome, where they will have pain in the arm that does not exist anymore. So like if I lost my arm from the elbow down, I would feel pain, numbness, or tingling in my hand that is no longer there. And it's the brain making this. And there's a really fascinating treatment that they have done to decrease that limb pain. And it's wild. And it's what they do is they put them in like a box like this with a mirror in it. And when they thread their arm through, it makes it look as if they are holding an object in both hands. So they're told to thread this arm through here, and then they'll see their arm on the other side in the mirror. And they are told, like this is their right hand here, and this is their left hand. They're told with their left non-existent hand to imagine like holding this thing, and they'll kind of feel it. And then what the doctor does is they just simply grab the mirror. Like once they say they can like kind of really feel it in that other hand, what they will do is they'll just take the mirror and they slowly remove it. Your brain sees that there is in fact no hand there, and the pain goes away. It is a really super fascinating treatment. But if that does not make you believe in the power of like imagery and how our brain can conjure up things, I don't know what will. So that is all of the sort of evidence as to why this works and how it can be effective. Let's talk about how to do it. But before we do, any questions? How is everybody feeling? That was a long, it's been a while since I checked in with you guys. Questions, comments, concerns. How is everybody feeling? Anybody have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
No, sir.
All right. Cool. Just making sure that was a long one for me. I feel like I've been talking without giving you guys a chance to chime in for a little
No,
bit.
it's all fine. It's all interesting. Just talking about like visualization, because one of my favorite videos is actually like it's GSP, the fighter. GSP, he talks about confidence and like how he pretty much had to like take a look at his life and realize that he was taking fighting too serious. It's an interesting video. Check it out.
Okay, love that. If you don't mind, email that to me. I'd love to watch that.
I got you.
So all right, so let's talk about like how to do this. So if you're asking someone to conjure up image, Phelps talked about this in his video. He did a good job of kind of breaking this down. Like I said in the very beginning, it's not just imagining, it's not just picturing it in your head and then like seeing it in your head. It's all of your senses, right? So we're going to use an acronym here, which I actually don't think is very helpful, called PETLEP, which is not a real word. But PETLEP, it's more of an initialism, I guess, than an acronym. But it's an initialism that describes the different aspects of effective imagery, right? So these are sort of the things you want to conjure up. If you're trying to create like a really powerful image in your head, you're trying to like imagine something, you want to go through like these things here, right? So you want to imagine the physical aspects of it. So the physical aspects that you conjure up, right? The physical part of it, like how you are moving in this imagined scenario, should closely approximate the similar like motor preparation, the similar motor execution that you would create in here, the same that you would do in your brain, right? So the PETLEP model encourages you to make sure that the physical aspects of your imagined scenario are similar. The environment should also be similar. This should take place in an environment similar to wherever it is you're going to be physically doing this activity, right? So for instance, like if you're trying to get better at, practicing your layups, right? You should imagine that on like whatever court you're going to be on. Whether if you have an away game and you know what that court looks like, I want you to, imagine yourself there. If you're trying to practice at home, imagine there, right? But the environment should be somewhat similar. The task should be similar. Task and learning are somewhat similar, but the task side of it is the imagined task should reflect the actual task that you are doing. So like focus on the same feelings, the same emotions, the same thoughts that you're going to have during whatever activity. And that again can help sort of control the emotional response. So the task should reflect whatever, if you're trying to get better at layups, don't imagine yourself practicing dunking. Shocker, I know. Like, that one, it should be the same task that you are going to be performing. Timing, try to imagine, this is one that I really struggle with. I tend to, whenever I use imagery, I tend to rush straight through really fast. But the imagined experience should take the same amount of time to perform the actual skill. You want to make sure that it is as realistic and similarly timed, as possible, right? Rather than just like rushing through. Or rather than like going slow. This is where like when I try to like slow down, sometimes I start to get scattered. My imagination runs wild. I've always found this to be the hardest part personally. Learning, so we're at the L on the PET model here. The learning should match your stage of learning. So again, if you are trying to get better at like a specific skill, you want to make sure that you are imagining, you're visualizing things that are similar to your level. It's not necessarily a bad idea to imagine yourself dunking a basketball, but if that's not, if you are doing like, that's actually great to use as like motivation to going, in the far future. But if you are new to the sport of basketball and you are trying to like develop one little skill at a time, it's really important to make sure that like when you are doing like consistent visualized practice, consistent imagery practice, that you are focusing on whatever specific skill you are currently working on in your stage of learning. So, if you have somebody who's new in the gym and you're like, hey, I want you to imagine, doing some type of like really heavy, like, power snatch from the ground, imagine being able to snatch like your own body weight. That's a great motivating thing. But for now, right, with my client is like brand new to this and they're just getting into Olympic lifts, right? It's like, we really just want them to practice and imagine doing like a good hinge, maybe on a deadlift. Then we want to imagine them doing like an effective rack pull. And then, and so we sort of like slowly build that up. It should reflect whatever stage of learning you are in currently, with your actual like imagined scenario. You want to use like the really advanced advanced learning stuff for, a scenario in the far future. That's also great, but just remember that it's used in the far future. Your emotions should be similar, or they should be whatever you want them to be, right? So your emotions that you're conjuring up can be used to imagine like what it would actually be. So if you think that you're going to be anxious, great, conjure up feeling anxious, right? Imagine that, and then imagine yourself calming down. So you imagine like what your emotions could be, and what they might be, and what you want them to be, right? And that is sort of how we learn how to control our emotional state. I've definitely done that version of it. Anybody in here who's ever broken up with someone, chances are you've sort of taken yourself through that emotionally ahead of time. It's like, man, this is going to be a hard conversation. I'm going to say this, and then they're probably going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're probably going to say that. You're kind of like walking your way through. Or if you've ever like won an argument in the shower, that's a lot of times like that's where I win all my arguments, is like where I'm like taking a shower and I'm like, oh, I should have said this, that would have been the perfect comeback. Oh, they wouldn't know what to say. That tends to be where I conjure up all my imagery. But that's a kind of a good example of learning how to kind of control that emotional response. Now, the next one, and again, he kind of touched on this in the video really, really well. When it comes to perspective, your imagery should be both from an internal and an external point of view. So this is where you kind of want to walk yourself through this visualization process. Imagine it from your own viewpoint. So like imagine it first person, right? And like take yourself through that scenario again. So let's just say you are trying to hit a baseball, right? And so you're going to conjure up your imagery using the pet lab bottle, right? So physically, I'm gonna imagine myself like, holding the bat. I've got it choked up, not super far because I tend to like a little bit of a wider grip. I am going to have my hands are gonna be in the same place that I normally have them, like with a closed grip right over left. I've got my left shoulder forward. The ball is gonna be coming down. And I'm gonna like swing, twisting the body first to get that like, torque, and then I'm going to like sort of push with the arms away. Once I hit that ball, I'm going to try and send it over to right center field, and then I'm going to drop that bat and run to first base, right? So that's the image that I'm going to sort of conjure up in my head. Physically, all of that, it should be the same. Now, the environment that this is taking place in should look similar to the environment that so I'm going to imagine like myself on home plate at my stadium and I'm gonna imagine like what the chalk looks like on the ground, like the color of the dirt, right? The environment is all going to be very similar. What the fence looks like behind me, the wooden back plate. I'm gonna imagine all of that being very similar. Picture of a standard, maybe a pitcher I've played against before in the past, an umpire behind me, right? All the environment, we're gonna conjure up that image exactly the same. The task, like I said, I'm trying to hit to right center field, so that should be sort of what I'm focused on. That way I can sort of like get it in that gap there, and that's gonna help because I got a man on third, right? Then the timing, we want to imagine the timing be exactly the same. So how long does it take for the pitcher to sort of go through his whole like backswing and stuff? What is it going to look like? How long is it going to take? What's the timing going to feel like? Learning should be the same. That's the type of ball that I can hit. That's one that's like not particularly difficult for me, versus like trying to hit a home run. Maybe I'm not that. That's not what I'm going to try to imagine here, right? Because a lot of times if you try to hit a home run, you just end up hitting a pop fly, and it's easy to catch. Emotional state, I'm going to try to like control my emotions as much as possible. I want to make sure that I am in a controlled, confident state of mind. And now, when it comes to perspective, I'm going to imagine myself doing all of this. So I'm seeing this from my first person perspective. I'm not seeing myself. I can't see my hair. I can't see, what my body posture looks like, but I can feel it, right? That's the internal imagery, right? You are doing your imagination. You're doing your visualization from your own perspective. Now, once I am done doing all of that, I'm going to go back to the start and go through that whole process again from an external viewpoint, as if I am watching myself. And that way, like if I felt the last time I was actually at bat that my posture was maybe like a little closed off in the shoulders, I imagine like what that looks like externally, and I imagine like what I need to do to get to neutral posture. It's like I need to drop that. I need to feel that, right? And so external imagery is imagine you are watching yourself do it, and it can be a really effective way to do this, because now especially with like the anxiety part of it, sometimes people will be like nervous about like visualizing like what other people are thinking about them while they're in a specific scenario, and that can lead to some like anxiety and negative emotions. So if you do some external imagery and then you realize, oh, no one's actually looking at me because like I see that guy working out over there, he's focused on himself, right? I see that guy like warming up, he's focused on himself. And that gives you that objective, very fair viewpoint, right? Which is very, 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 very helpful. So when you're going through this whole process, you can hear Phelps was kind of talking about this, right? He talked about how like he would go through the entire process of imagining himself doing something one way and then imagining himself doing something like another way. And he would take himself through it from a first person perspective, and he would take himself through it from a third person perspective. So he would see himself doing it in his own mind. He would see himself doing it sort of outside of things, right? So that's what we want to kind of encourage in our clients, if you are trying to work with like an athlete and you're trying to help them learn how to like control their emotional response to something, right? We would take them through this process and then we would evaluate. We would ask them like, hey, did you feel like you had a lot of control over your imagery? Did you feel like you didn't know, like, did you feel like the timing was similar? Did you feel like you rushed through it, right? And that can help us sort of like course correct and work on the things that we need to work on. I wish that someone would do this for my guy DK Metcalf. I'm sure that someone is, but like that guy keeps losing his temper during games. I really hope that this year in the off season, someone is working with him to learn how to sort of control that emotional response a little bit better. Oh man, I was so bummed out when I saw Russ is leaving. It has been a hard week as a Seattle Seahawks fan, emotionally. But we're gonna see what happens. We got like a bajillion draft picks. So yeah, so we do want to sort of evaluate this. Work with our client and ask them like, hey, did you feel like your timing was similar? Do you feel like your learning was similar? Right? What do you like? Was that learning effective for you? Do you feel like you didn't know enough about it yet? Do we take it back down a little bit more to the basics, right? Did you see yourself internally? Did you see yourself externally? Which one did you have more control over? And there we go, right? That's what we're gonna do. Now, we know that like imagery is a powerful tool. However, don't make the assumption that like you are going to just simply get great at some type of activity without actual physical practice. Imagery does have its limitations. I do think it's an amazing tool that can be used, but I don't necessarily think that like, I'm not going to become a millionaire by imagining that I'm becoming a millionaire. I need to take actions specifically to make that happen. However, if I imagine this scenario and I, constantly, sort of pair this up with my problem solving, I pair this up with goal setting, I pair this up with, behavioral therapy techniques to make my behaviors match that way. If I imagine myself doing all of this and then I actually practice doing this in my real life, I think that the sky's the limit in terms of what you can accomplish. I think that you start to use imagery as like a part of like very effective habits in your life. You can shape your life to be however you want it to be. You want to have less aches and pains in your life. Great. I want you to imagine a life where like you're more physically active, mobile, and have less aches and pains. You want to imagine yourself like being in like a specific type of shape. Awesome. Imagine that and then take the actions necessary to actually do it. Right. It's not going to happen without actual, practice. But the imagined practice is what is going to sort of like support that, right? It can reinforce things and make those things happen faster, better, and much more effectively. So when you're designing this training, when you're designing like an imagery program, when you're leading somebody through this, make sure that you're always creating like very vivid image. You can do that by going through the PetLep. That's going to help you create a very vivid, very accurate image, but also make sure that you have like plenty of control over it. Sometimes, like I said, my imagination tends to run wild when I try to sit and, sort of take myself through this. I can sometimes do it pretty well as I'm about to go to sleep because I'm already in a very relaxed state. But I've told you guys before, I am a firm believer in meditation, but I am also a horrendous meditator. So like it is not really my thing, but I will sometimes run through scenarios while I am going on a run. And I'll imagine those scenarios. That can really help me prepare for my day. That's one of my favorite things to do. So then actually practice it, right? Practice this stuff regularly and it can help increase your effectiveness, right? We watched that video about like practicing effectively earlier, right? Sit down, minimize your distractions, and actually do this. You can also create a little bit of coping imagery. If you tend to make a mistake, you've got a backup plan for how you are going to feel about that mistake. If anybody in here ever watched the show Friends, I remember seeing a clip or an episode of that where the actor Matt LeBlanc's character is like Joey. He's like he is up for some type of like television or movie award, and he's like practicing the face that he's going to make is his gracious loser face. He's like, if somebody else wins, he'll go, okay, yeah, but then like the time comes and it happens and he makes like, he's all ticked off and you can see him cursing on. But yeah, that's, he was practicing the coping imagery, right? If you do make a mistake, you can imagine yourself like run through that scenario of you making that mistake, then take yourself back, ask yourself, what would you do differently? And then imagine that scenario again, performing the right action, and then rinse and repeat internally and externally. This is one of the reasons why like coaches will sort of, they call it looking at the tape, right? They record things, you see yourself do it, and that will help you sort of like conjure up that very vivid image. It can boost the clarity, it can boost your motivation. You can see yourself doing things specifically. So that is how we sort of implement imagery. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we would do this depending on what stage of change our client is in. If you have a pre-contemplator client, you're probably not going to. One of the best ways to like just get somebody to start thinking about making a change is just get them to actually imagine it by hearing like a very similar story, so it's like, hey, I had a client who was just in the same scenario as you are. They did X, Y, and Z, and now this is where they're at. So they hear that and they go, oh, well, maybe this is possible. So they start thinking about it, right? And they become a contemplator. If they're a contemplator, it's like they're thinking about it, but now they're like, they're not really ready to take any steps, right? Learn how to break those barriers, right? Imagine like, it's like, okay, well, tell me why not tomorrow, right? This is a conversation that I had with an uncle of mine about like the vaccines and stuff. He is very scared of getting vaccinated, or was very scared. And so we were talking to him about like, I was like, hey, like, why don't you want to get this? He's like, oh, it's untested. And I think that like, it could be really unhealthy. And I was like, those are valid concerns, like, I was like, so you believe in the power of vaccines? He was like, yeah, absolutely. He's like the flu vaccine. He's like polio vaccine, I had to get it when I was a kid. And I was like, okay. And I was like, so why not this one? Like, he's like, well, this just hasn't been around long enough. I was like, okay, great. And then we had a conversation and I was like, so give me a percentage of like, what percentage of likelihood are you to get this shot? And he was like, oh, I don't know. He's like, I'm 98% sure that I don't want to get it. And I was like, okay. And then I asked him, I was like, why not 100%? And that made him sort of start to realize, he was like, he wasn't 100% confident that he didn't want this, right? And then eventually started thinking about my aunt and how she would get sick, and he kind of changed his mind because she had gotten the vaccine, but he was also going to get it after. He also saw her get it, and she was fine, so that helped as well. But helping sort of like overcome like a specific barrier, learning how to like realize that like maybe we're not 100% sure all the time. Maybe we're only 90. Why aren't we 100% sure? Like when I'm confident, it's black and white. I'm 100% sure. The Frisbee tournament coming up, I'm sure that I'm gonna do well. Maybe not gonna win the whole thing, but I'm confident that I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna play. But if you ask me like how confident I am that these surfing lessons are gonna be easy, more like 50-50. I think I'm probably gonna do pretty well. I think the water's a lot colder here and the waves are a little more treacherous, a little bit different. I'm less confident, so getting sort of a percentage on that confidence level can sometimes help you get through that barrier. If you're like, oh, I'm terrible at exercise, and it's like, so you're 100% certain you're never going to meet your goals. And they're like, well, not 100% certain. It's like, great, not 100% certain. Where's that 5% coming from? Let's see if we can turn that into 50%, 60%. Let's turn that 5% into 100% confident you're going to reach your goals. We're trying to get there, right? So it can be used to break barriers. Helps people be a little bit more fair about the opinions that they might have about their own, abilities. Preparation clients, these are people who are, thinking about maybe in the next month actually doing this thing. They're not ready to start today, but we're trying to get them ready to start, right? So maybe like they can imagine like having like a satisfied meal. I've actually done this many times with my clients. I will use like a cheat meal as an example, and be like, all right, I want you to imagine you had your first strong week on this new routine, you killed it, you crushed it, and so you're rewarding yourself with, and then I'll ask them what they want for their cheat meal. Awesome, really fun, powerful tool, because then they're like, oh my God, I'm excited to do this, right? I've had clients say like when they meet their weight loss goal, they're gonna take themselves to Disneyland. That's so freaking fun, right? And so I'll be like, what's your favorite ride? Tell me about like what's gonna be like the day you hit that pound weight, you hit your scale weight that you're aiming for, you hit your body fat percentage, whatever. When you reach your goal, what's the emotional state you're going to be in getting ready to go to Disneyland? And they'll like walk themselves through that. They'll tell me, they're like, oh, I'm gonna be so excited. I'm like, yeah, you are. Like, let's go. If you have a client in the action stage, this is kind of a fun one. This is sort of looking at like the daily grind, right? Imagine like overcoming the minor little challenges, right, on a regular basis, and how you're going to sort of overcome that, right? Or my favorite, imagine like a new routine. So I'll tell my clients sometimes who are like, just new and like engaging in this, is like, I'm like, I know this is hard today, but imagine how good you're going to feel and how good you're going to be at this exercise in like 6 months. And I'm going to throw this into a harder routine. I want you to imagine what that routine is going to be like. And they go, oh my God, like they're like, that sounds terrible. And I'm like, yeah, it does. And it's like kind of this like fun like thing where they're like, oh, but it's also motivating. Like it's like kind of a fun way. They're like, oh, that sounds really scary. I'm here for it, like love like having my clients imagine the next routine. That's one of the things that we talked about this when we met a couple weeks ago, guys. Remember how we were talking about like setting up like routine 1 might just be like 3 days a week, full body routine, same exercises. And so that month I'll continually remind my clients. So like next month, you're gonna have 2 routines, you're gonna swap back and forth. And then like next I'll be like, now imagine 3 routines, right? Now imagine like upper lower, right? 4 routines. And we increase the number of days we lift. So by continually like focusing on the future, you got your client, they don't have time to think about falling back into old habits. They're focused on, what's going to come next. And that's a great way to sort of use imagery to push your client down the road. Now in maintenance level, very similar to the action level, you're just going to have them imagine like the next step. And it's like, all right, so now we sort of met our weight loss goal. What's next? We got to where we want body weight wise. What's the next thing you want to work on? How are you going to maintain this? Right. And like, I don't know. It's like, maybe enter a bodybuilding competition. You never thought you'd get up on stage, but now maybe it becomes a reality, right? Or maybe you want to become like a leader in a group exercise class. You ever think about getting certified, right? We start to like imagine these scenarios where like they take things beyond, they take things even further. I'm sure that when Jeff Bezos became a millionaire, he started imagining how he could become, a billionaire. So that's where we start imagining the next step. That way, again, we have no reason to fall back into old habits. And there you go, guys. That is your guide to simple imagery or visualization, whatever you want to call it. That's about everything I got. How you guys feeling?
Feeling good, sir.
Feeling great.
Cool. All right, everybody ready for the weekend?
I guess.
Yes, ready.
All right.
I guess.
Okay.
Well, let me kill the recording.